Okay, hello. I would love to know if audio and video are working and how things are sounding for you guys. And welcome, welcome. Just a couple minutes till we get started. So if you, go ahead and type into the chat. Let me actually change the mode here. Tanisha, sorry, I just brought you onto the space. I'm going to put you guys in Q&A mode. That way we'll keep the line a little bit clear. So awesome to see a good view, Tanisha, and your glorious hair, and Bindi, I think. If you guys are able to hear me, would you please type into the chat box, which you should see at the bottom half of your screen, and just say yes or no or anything of that nature. Let me know how things are going. Awesome. Great. Okay, so we have just another minute until we're going to get started here. And in the meantime, I would love for those of us who are gathered a little early to introduce ourselves to each other, because I think this is going to be a really particular group of folks who've been attracted to this topic. And I know that we have quite a number of people who are joining us via recording. So hello to you guys as well. And I'm so glad that you're going to be participating in your own asynchronous way. So let's go ahead and just do a little introduction. So why don't you start by telling us just maybe one memory or one experience that you have had with intuition that has been powerful in your life. So this could be a time when you did or didn't listen to your intuition. This could be a dream that you had, anything that that kind of tells us a little bit about your relationship with your intuition. I would love to hear about that. Looks like we have one person who's still in the waiting room. Let's see if I can add her. Okay, so welcome, Christina. We're just doing a little introduction. If people are going to type into the chat a memory or an experience that they have had with their intuition, just as we warm up and wait one more minute for any people who are going to join us late. And I want to say a special thank you to the lovely Christina Caudill of Radiant, who is in fact the reason that this session has happened, because it was in a thread that Christina started that this whole idea of talking about how plants support our intuition kind of sprung forth. So Christina, you're going to recognize the framework for the beginning of this session, and the sort of the 3 points that we're going to work into come directly from my response to that post of yours. So thank you for being the incredible leader that you are and for the inspiration for this class. I'm just waiting for you guys to activate a little bit here in the chat, but perhaps we're going to stay quiet, and I don't want to keep you all waiting. So if you're new to this platform, the chat function that you are not currently using very much, but that you did tell me you could hear, this chat function is something that will allow us to stay interactive during the presentation itself. And it also will allow us to keep moving at a reasonable pace, rather than like on a conference call when the line is open, it can get really, really muddy and messy. So I really encourage you to stay connected with the chat. And if you have a question about something that I'm saying, I want you to just go ahead and go right into the chat button, and I will come back and forth from sort of sharing my content and then reading the chat and answering questions as we go, okay? And I am so sorry, I have one more admin thing to do before we start. I just realized that my computer is not plugged in, and I have just moved to a brand new space, so this is my new office and things are a little bit out of whack. So Laura, Tanisha has answered that intro question, talking about Reiki and going deeper beyond the physical, even before she has met someone formally. It's going to be a perfect introduction So go ahead and keep going with that, you guys. I'm going to run and grab my charger so we're not interrupted later, and then we are going to be diving right in about 1 minute. Okay, thank you guys so much for bearing with me. So let's start. I know that we're all coming from very different places in terms of how we think about and how deeply we're interacting with our intuition. So I want to just start out by coming up with a little bit of a definition or exactly what we're talking about here when we're talking about intuition. So I want you to think about, what is it that this means to you? What is your definition of, intuitive knowing, intuitive experience? And I want to just share what is for me the most resonant definition and what we're going to work with today, because there's a little bit of a spectrum here in the talk between intuitive knowing and then more outright, psychic or numinous experience. And the thing that I believe ties both of these definitions together comes from one of my intellectual heroes, Carl Jung. And he described intuition as the process of perception via the unconscious. And I want to just repeat that again and let that sink in. So intuition is the process of perceiving via the unconscious. So normally I think that we think about perception as a conscious process. It's like we know what we're looking at, we know what we're seeing, we know what we're tasting or reading. And the intuitive way of knowing is metabolized through a completely different way of working in the brain. And as we all know, the brain is far more unused than used. Like there's a lot more going on in your brain than even scientists have fully understood, and that we seem to have a great amount of capacity that we're not really using. And in my mind, I think that this is sort of where some of these deeper intuitive or even psychic kinds of connection and experience lie. I'm going to read also here what Laura said, that it's been a while for her since she's felt in touch with her intuition, but she used to have inklings all the time, feelings, her chest and gut when something was off. It's a feeling of waiting a little longer to leave. She knew that her roommate was going to be fired. So, we've had these kind of experiences, and there's no conscious way, there was no logical or rational way for her to know that. There's no logical way for Tanisha to know something about a person before she's really met or spoken to them. But the unconscious is so much vaster than the conscious processes of our mind. If we think of consciousness as like the tip of the iceberg or the flowering part of the plant, and the unconscious as all of the roots or everything underneath, you can start to see why it's true that intuitive knowing, in fact, is a much wider doorway for possibilities than rational or logical or even kind of sensing type of thought and understanding. And as we're thinking about the plants and the way that the plants can support intuition, the deepest part that we're going to come back to in all of these tools that I'm going to share with you today is that the main way that the plants support us is by helping to get us out of this narrow, conscious way of interacting with reality. And that might seem a little bit weird for those of us who are sort of into, consciousness or, evolutionary practices, because we think we want to get more conscious. And in a lot of ways, that's true. But if we can only, if we only privilege consciousness and the things that are bright and in the light, then we really do close the door to the things that are as yet unknown, unspoken, or in the intuitive and numinous realm. So this is really about a sacred marriage of opening up to the unconscious, the herbs helping us to do that, helping us to get out of our own way. Ritual practices also helping us to get out of our own way and tap into deeper ways of making meaning than through language. And that is what we are going to be all about today. And then part of the work that comes later is once we get that material up from the unconscious, or we get those intuitive hints and hunches, or even flashes of deep insight, then there is a process of what does it take to bring that into the light of consciousness. And that's a whole other topic that's not for today. We're going to stay with the first part. So I want to start by sharing what I shared with Christina in her post that inspired this class about the 3 ways that historically and traditionally, and still today, plants and herbs have been able to support intuitive knowing. So the first one is in a way, simplest, and that is that we can use herbal medicines of all different kinds, lots of different delivery mechanisms. We can use herbal medicines to relax the body and to put us into more of a parasympathetic state. So your nervous system has the fight or flight response, right? When you're stressed or you're like activated and nervous. And in that mode, in that fight or flight response, there are changes that happen in your brain and in your eyes and in your reflexes that are about focusing narrowly, being precise, and being able to really be clued in to what's happening physically around you, so that you can fight, so that you can run away, so that you can think on your feet and respond in the moment in a crisis, And this is an incredible gift, right? I don't know if any of you have ever had the experience of being in a really dangerous situation where you didn't have time to think and you just somehow did the right thing. Your body just did what you needed to do in order to get through it. That is really like a fight or flight kind of response. It's not so much an intuitive response as it is a reflex, and as it is a product of really intense focus that your body puts you into. And you've probably had the experience of being in this fight or flight state when you're not in physical danger. And then what tends to happen is we get physically tense and tight, our bodies feel uncomfortable. We have high levels of cortisol flowing through our systems, which causes a lot of health effects that we're not going to go into today, and causes changes in how our brains and our minds are working. And what I would say in a very simplified way is that when you're in this kind of stressed place, you're tight and you're focused, and there isn't that ability to be wide and to be open and to be sort of like a creature with all of your nerve endings and branches and angel wings, like open out into the ether so that you can sense and feel things coming in from the unconscious. On the other hand, the other possibility in our nervous systems is this parasympathetic mode, this rest and digest mode. And this is the mode in which we feel sensual, in which we want to make love, in which we want to, our brains want to regenerate and make new connections. And it's this mode in which metaphorical language and unconscious perception and new connections are most readily able to arise. So if I think about Tanisha's example with Reiki, for a lot of people who have some kind of a physical practice that involves calming the body so that energy can move through, whether that's meditation, yoga, Reiki. This is often a time when the intuition is most readily accessible. And the plants can help us to get there. There are lots of other ways to get there. You can take lots of classes on meditations and mental practices, mantra, all kinds of ways to create this shift. But today we're going to talk about how to do it with the plants. So that's way number one. I'm going to quickly go over these other two, and then we're going to come back and go through them together. So then the second way is perhaps the most dramatic and in some ways forbidden in our culture, because it is literally legally forbidden in the case of many of these plants. The second way is through psychotropics. And so you may have experienced, or you may simply have heard about or know through sort of popular culture about lots and lots of different plants that exert a powerful influence on the mind and allow us to have other kinds of consciousness than what we normally would on our own. So this would include certainly marijuana to some extent, though mostly what marijuana does is sort of create a parasympathetic response. But it would also include the hallucinogenic and medicinal mushrooms. It includes ayahuasca. It includes iboga. It includes trying to think of all of these different plants. There might be more. You guys type in the chat if there are some others that I'm forgetting. I know there are a lot more. And it also includes some very toxic plants that, especially in European history, have a lot of really, peyote, mescaline. Yep, those are both in this category. Ergot would be in this category. It's not an herb; it's a fungus, but it's the same kind of deal. And this also can include some of the plants in the deadly nightshade family, like henbane, belladonna, some of these plants that have been historically used in the quote-unquote flying ointments that were associated with witchcraft during the Inquisition. Now, some of this is very unreliable because people who confessed to witchcraft at that time were, tortured horribly and terribly. So any kind of confession that happens under torture, is oftentimes invalid. But people who were accused of witchcraft during that time period often referenced using some of these deadly nightshade plants in a balm or an ointment that they would apply to their bodies and use to fly. But of course, the flying was probably a psychoactive experience. To fly to the gatherings of witches and these kinds of things. And it's really kind of historically fascinating. I do not recommend trying it. These are pretty dangerous plants that have valid medicinal uses, but that I certainly would not want to be legally responsible for telling you to use. And this whole realm of medicine, of psychoactive plants that facilitate journeys and shamanic experiences and all of these kinds of psychic experiences, I believe is perfectly valid. And because of the nature of the illegality of these kinds of things, this forbidden nature, there's also a very strong sort of negative or unhealthy energy that becomes clustered around it. And there can be a real escapism that can become a danger of using these kinds of plants. So I think that if this is something that interests you or that you're intrigued by, it's really important to look into it and to work with someone who is a guide, who's very experienced, and who can provide the proper container for you to work with these kinds of things. We're not going to go into that way of using herbs for intuition today. And in fact, I think that it's really important to have a solid framework through more mundane methods, perhaps, before we move into using some of these consciousness-altering plants. And then lastly, the third way is perhaps the most subtle way. And this is through a connection with the plant spirit itself. And for a long time, I was steeped in the scientific tradition, like many of you, I'm sure. And the idea of like the plant spirit stuff, like that really was kind of like, oh my gosh, I don't know. I don't know about all this. Like, it strained my credulity a little bit. And what I'm going to share with you today, I think, is going to be a really direct path to beginning to open up to the possibility of plant spirit communication that can happen in a little bit more of a grounded and sensual way than, through drawings of plant fairies and things like that, which if that works for you, great. But that has never quite worked for me. It always felt a little bit too potentially made up, and I couldn't be sure about it. So I need things that are a little bit more, feel a little bit more certain and a little bit more tangible. So those are the three ways, and we're going to focus on the first and the third way today. And I decided that I was getting ready to make a PowerPoint for you guys, and then I was like, what am I doing? I can't make a PowerPoint about plants for intuition. That just feels so wrong. So I have a huge collection of essential oils and dried herbs and a couple of things here on my desk that I'm going to actually show you. And it's not going to be quite hands-on because we're not in the same space, but I'm going to try to evoke as much as I can of the practical and the sensual aspects of doing this work so that you can at least see it and not just read about the names of these things on a slide. It feels a lot more honest to me. So before we go into that first category, talking about how herbs can help us to get out of our head, move into our bodies, and open up to unconscious perception, let's just pause for a moment and see if there are any questions. So any questions on those three general ways that herbs can support intuition? Anything that you want to ask or check in about before we move on and get going? You can just type into the chat if you have any questions at all. Oh, yay! I just checked the list. There's a bunch more of you here. I see Allison and Arwa, Emily, Laura, Megan. Awesome. And Tanisha, you're still here. Fabulous. Okay. Laura says, nope, I'm good. Great. Okay. And we'll have time later, I think, to do some actual voice-to-voice Q&A. So I think we're good for now, but that will also be a possibility as we move on. Okay, so let's start with the most basic use of herbs that we can think about, which I bet you can all guess. It's going to be tea. It's going to be drinking in water-based extractions of plants. And how many of you, I want to just see a yes or no, how many of you have ever blended your own herbal teas before? Made your own blend of herbal teas? Yes, no, no. Okay, yes. Good. This is a good mix. Okay. So we're going to be doing actually a fair amount of formulation today on this call. First, a little bit with dried herbs for teas and infusions, and then a little bit with essential oils and actually in oil. We'll talk about other ways of using them. But here are some guidelines when you start out with formulating and blending your own teas. So the first thing is that today, because of the nature of this class, we're not going to go into the kind of the health contraindications and indications of all of these plants. So it's really important that if you're taking any medication or if you have any known health conditions, just do a little bit of research before you go for any of these herbs. The things we're using today are generally safe, and there are a couple of herbs I'm going to talk about that I don't have in front of me to demo with you. But it's really just important to do your due diligence, because the way that herbs work is that they match to you as a person rather than matching to a condition or to a use. So we're going to talk about all of these herbs to help with relaxation and opening up the unconscious, but they don't just fit everybody. They fit specific needs and specific people. I'm going to give you a little bit of that, but please make sure that before you like take huge amounts of any of this stuff, that you do a little bit of research, and that always start with a little bit of a smaller dose, especially if you're a sensitive person, and then gradually increase if you need more. Okay? So let's talk about herbs that you already know and love for relaxation. I want to just get as big of a list as we can. And then I'm going to tell you a couple of different formulas for sort of different types or different situations that you might find yourself in where intuition is blocked. So, relaxing, calming herbs. What do you know and love already? What are your favorites? Linden. Oh my gosh. That was not the first one that I thought you guys were going to come up with. Amazing. Chamomile. Yes. Valerian. Tulsi. Yes. Holy basil. Awesome. You guys. It's great. Any others? Can I get a lavender? Can I get lemon balm? Yeah. Uh-huh. Awesome. Okay. Fabulous. Um, so if you notice this list, okay, if you think about kind of the sweet, cooling nature of linden flowers, if you've ever had those, the relaxing for your tummy, kind of yellow, almost apple-like and slightly bitter flavor of chamomile, the really like stinky Jim sweat socks of valerian. Um, and then that brightness of lemon balm, that bright sunniness of lemon balm, or that slight spice of holy basil. What we can already see just in this list is that there are a lot of herbs that can help to provide relaxation for the body that have slightly different energetic properties. Now, what do I mean by energetics? Energetics in herbal medicine doesn't mean the same thing that it means in some other metaphysical circles. In some metaphysical circles, when we talk about energetics, we mean like, the sort of non-physical imprint that something has. Um, in herbal medicine, energetics refers to almost like the weather of that herb. Like, is it hot? Is it cool? Is it drying? Is it moistening? Does it move up or does it move down? Kind of like the weather report of what would happen in your body, like under, cloudy with a chance of wood betony, it's going to be a certain way rather than the bright and sunny nature of lemon balm, if that makes sense. So what we're going to do now is talk about a couple of different places that you might be in where your intuition is blocked, what the energetic signature of that looks like, and then an herbal formula that you can use in a couple of different ways to help unblock that issue, okay? And I think this is going to be the most fun if you guys actually tell me a couple of real life ways that you feel like your intuition is blocked. So I have a couple of thoughts prepared, but I would love to hear real life from you where you feel like when you signed up for this class, like what particular ways you're feeling like you want to be able to strengthen or heighten your intuition or your psychic perception. I know Laura had mentioned that she feels like she used to be more connected and now is not. I'd love to know, Laura, if you can identify at all, what is it that feels like it gets in the way? And this is open to everybody as well. Good. Arwa says overthinking, second guessing, and doubting. Fabulous. And Arwa, along with that, I have the advantage of knowing you, so this isn't really all that intuitive. This is just a logical question. Um, Along with that, Arwa, does there tend to be a feeling of exhaustion, or does there tend to be a feeling of overactivity with the physical body? More on the side of exhaustion or overactivity? Hmm. Tired and wired, a little bit of both. Okay, great. So let's start here. And this is beautiful because Allison's suggestion of linden is going to come into play right here. So the first formula that I want to offer for those of us who can be in a space of feeling tired and wired. So there's an amount of like amped up energy in the body, and yet underneath that, a very deep underlying fatigue that if you really had to weigh the two things, the fatigue is more, but the wired feeling is it's like an involuntary energy that doesn't really give you the strength and the stamina to do what you want, but you can't turn it off. You know, so it's like that kind of insomnia when you've been sitting in front of the computer all day, you're exhausted, you want nothing more than to be able to fall asleep, but you lie in bed and you just like you can't turn off your brain and you can't relax. So in this kind of a situation, energetically, what's happening is it's almost like there's stuff like caught in your head, right? Circling around. And the physical body is actually so depleted that it cannot relax. It's as if you need a certain amount of energy to flip over into the parasympathetic state and go to sleep. And so here is where we need our remedies and our teas to be kind of cooling and grounding and nourishing. And that can be sometimes much more powerful in this particular state than even a really strong sedative like valerian, okay? If this is going over anybody's head, please stop me in the chat because I know we're kind of all at different levels in terms of familiarity with herbs. So by all means, flag me down if we need to go a little slower. And in this situation, and all of our blends today are going to be of 3 herbs to make this easy. So in this case, I like a blend of rose petals, linden flowers, and skullcap, all 3 of these together. Okay, so when we do formulation of herbs using dried herbs like this, okay, this is what I mean when I say like equal parts, you know, 1 part of each. So you can use any kind of container you like. This is just a little half cup measuring cup. And it doesn't matter what size the part is. You just need them to be equal that you can measure. So this, for all intents and purposes, this is going to be 1 part. And I don't actually have rose and linden available right now. Oh, I have lavender. That would work. But I do have some skullcap. So when you get your dried herbs, I like Mountain Rose Herbs, which is on an online place that sells all kinds of really wonderful and ethically sourced herbs. And I have no financial relationship with them. I just really love them. So that's who I use. And when you get the herbs, they come in this kind of a bag. So this is skullcap. And this is the herb cut and sifted. So it looks like that. It looks like just kind of a bunch of dried grass almost. And when you want to measure 1 part, you just dump into your container, whatever you choose. And then you smell it. This is very, very herbaceous, very green, very cooling smelling. So then you just take this, and then if I were doing this particular blend with the rose and linden, I would have 1 scoop of each of those. And then you would put all of those guys together in another vessel. So I put them into, a larger jar, my mason jar or a plastic container, whatever it is that you like. And then if there's enough room in there, you can just mix them by shaking it up, or stick a spoon in there and twirl it around. And then from that larger mix, you can create individual doses whenever you're ready to use the mixture. There are two different ways that you can take these kinds of blends that I'm telling you about today in terms of dose. So if you wanted to make a tea, so a gentle, sort of lower dose of taking these herbs by mouth in water, what you would do is you use, a teapot or a single teacup. So this is a teapot that has a strainer that's built in. And what you can do is you can make an entire pot if you want a larger amount, if you're sharing with a friend, or you can put a smaller amount just into this strainer and then stick this into a single mug or teacup for a smaller serving. If you're going to use this blend, this rose petals, linden flowers, and skullcap, that I think I would do about a heaping tablespoon per 6 ounces of water. So that's usually about the size of a teacup. It's a little bit less than the size of a mug. And if you want to make a stronger version of this brew, which, some of us are like low dose people and some of us are high dose people. I tend to be kind of a high dose person. And it just depends on the way that your body metabolizes things. So it's not really necessarily a mark of your sensitivity emotionally or spiritually. It's more of a mark of just how your metabolism works. So if you tend to be someone who needs higher doses of things in order to really shift or to feel something change, you might like to make an infusion instead of a tea. So can anyone, Emily, Arwa, maybe Tanisha, I'm kind of leaning on you. Allison, you might know this. Can anyone tell me the difference between an infusion and a tea? Both have water. They're both, in this case, we're using the same herbs. What would be the difference? You can also just guess if you want. Yes, okay, you guys are great. Both of these are true. Infusions are stronger than teas, yes. They use a larger amount of herb, and they also are steeped over a longer period of time. So what they're able to do is to really extract not just the aromatic compounds, which would be like the essential oils, but they're also able to extract a lot more of the mineral content and just a lot more of the nutritional value of the herbs. And they are stronger and more concentrated. So when you're steeping a tea for medicinal purposes, about 20 minutes covered is the amount of time that you want to use for that tea. The cover is important because that keeps the essential oils in instead of letting them just fill your house and make it smell good, but then you're not able to actually have them in your brew anymore. With an infusion, what you're going to do is I make them in mason jars. So you can see how big this mason jar is, right? This is like, looks like it's like the size of my head on this video. So this is a quart-sized jar. And into this quart-sized jar, you would put a full ounce of your herbal blend, your mix. Now, you can do it with a single herb, and a lot of infusions are drunk that way. But for our purposes today, we're not using any single herbs. We're talking about formulas. So this method will work for formulation as well, even though a lot of you may have heard me talk mostly about, just straight nettle infusions before. So it's slightly different. So an ounce of dried herbs, it depends on what the herb is. For an herb that's very light, of course, it's going to be more. But roughly, this is about a cup of herbs. So it's like twice this amount that would be in the bottom of this jar. And then what you do is you pour hot water over the herbs just like you would to make tea. You cover just like you would to make tea. And then you let this steep for 4 hours at least, or overnight. So this is something that you have to plan ahead for. Like a tea, you can respond in the moment. An infusion, you have to be planning that this is something that you want to do. So those are two delivery methods. And then the third one that I think is really powerful if we're thinking about opening to an intuition is to actually absorb, to use your skin to absorb and drink in the herbs instead of taking them by mouth. So I really love to use the infusion method to make a really strong concentrated brew of herbs that then I pour into my bath. So this is, I think, a ton easier and less messy than just taking the herbs and like throwing them in the bathtub. As much as, you know, the idea of that seems really cool. Like I would love to be swimming in like swampy, you know, lots of herbs around me. But then when it, you know, would come time to actually clean the bathtub and like get the herbs off of myself, like that would just be a non-starter. So you can skip all of that. And you can actually get something a lot stronger than like your standard bath teas, like if you've ever seen those like bundles of bath tea sold, because of the temperature of your bath water and they're not putting all that many herbs in there, that doesn't tend to be really strong either. So this infusion method poured into the bath is a great way to deliver some of these herbs. And you can also choose to do a foot bath instead of a whole body bath. And for any of you who are aware of sort of astrological symbolism or, you know, some of these other resonances that can come into the ritual aspect of working with herbs, Pisces rules the feet. And Pisces is associated with the unconscious and intuition. And so I think there's something really fascinating from kind of a correspondences perspective about using a foot bath as a way of delivering some of these intuition strengthening brews. Okay, so those are our three methods of delivering the herbs: tea, infusion, and bath. And I'm sorry, my partner is now, I told him not to come back through this door. He's doing it. Okay, so any questions about those three or about that first blend before we actually move on and talk about a couple more formulas for using dried herbs, and then we'll go ahead and get into the essential oils. He remembered. He stopped coming through. No questions? Okay. All right, so I want to talk, we started with sort of the lightest blend, the one that's a little bit sweeter and a little bit more sort of a little bit more nourishing. And I want to now kind of take it up a notch in terms of when there is actually anxiety or when there are strong cravings or strong attraction to things that you know are not good for you. Okay, so this could be, you know how you feel cut off from your intuition if you are feeling like the pull of cravings of any kind, like cravings for particular food, cravings for that like ex-partner who's no good for you, cravings for alcohol or drugs or any of these kinds of things. Does anyone resonate with the nature of how the combination of stress and craving is a very particular way that we are cut off from our intuition? Is that resonating? You can just give me a Y or an N. Yes. Okay. Anybody else? Anybody who doesn't know what this feels like? Yeah, Megan, thank you. Yeah. Okay. So this blend is going to include Skullcap, like we talked about last time. But we're going to also add a couple of other herbs in order to focus it a little bit more in this direction. So Skullcap, that was included in that rose and linden blend, this is a very strong anti-anxiety herb that also has a particular affinity for the kind of tension that comes into our bodies when we're feeling like we have to keep striving and pushing and like making it happen. So that's what we're going to do first, because if you're in a mode of like trying to make things happen, how open can you be to intuitive perception? You know, not very open. So that's our Skullcap. Okay, and then the next herb is going to be wood betony. So I don't talk about this one very much. Wood betony is a relaxing nervine that is very, very calming for the nervous system. And it has a particular, yes, exactly, stackies. It has a very particular affinity for overcoming addiction and cravings and calming that part of the mind that gets hyper-focused on particular substances or behaviors and really feels that need. And so this is a really lovely combination with Skullcap because this one is working a little bit more on the mind aspect, and then Skullcap works a little bit more on the physical tension associated with that. So that's going to be our second herb. And you can, in fact, and wood betony is pretty sedative. So if you are sensitive, use this with a little bit of caution because this could just put you right to sleep. And then you will be having dreams instead of intuitive knowings while awake. So just be conscious with this blend. Start with this one in a tea and maybe in a foot bath, and then move to an infusion if you are someone who does high doses. So this is wood betony we're adding. And by themselves, this is a perfectly good pair. A couple of you guys are entrepreneurial colleagues. This is like my launch blend. Like if I'm in the middle of a launch and I'm like really striving too much and I'm like craving to see like signups happen and I'm like really stressed, this is my blend, just like Skullcap and wood betony in like really large amounts is what I tend to do. And if you want to kind of soften the effects of a brew that is potentially strong, like this is, one of the things you can do is add another plant that is a little bit gentler or that has more of a kind of more offers direction and circulation to the other herbs, because it will cut down on the total amount of those stronger plants that are in the formula. And then it also adds a benefit for circulation or sort of aiming the formula in the direction that you want to go. So the herb that we're going to use today for that is spearmint leaf. So how many of you have ever used spearmint or peppermint just for taste or flavor or for any other reason in any form, essential oil, tea, any form? Yeah, tell me a little bit about I've shared with you about these first two herbs. Tell me what you have experienced when you have used mint, spearmint, peppermint. Oh, it smells so good, you guys. It smells so good. And incidentally, spearmint and peppermint, this is a really good way to test. If you're buying your herbs from somewhere locally, not from, Mountain Rose or a place where you know that the freshness is good. If you can you open the drawers, in the health food store for the spearmint and for the peppermint, if they smell the same or if there isn't just a huge difference between them, then don't buy any herbs from that place because they have very different smells and very similar character, but a very different aesthetic experience. So that's a really good screening for your retailers if you're buying herbs locally. Nobody's going to tell me about your experience with peppermint? I would love to hear it so much. Okay, let me put this guy in the mix here. Okay, so peppermint and spearmint. Tanisha, yes, she says, I've used it to enhance focus while taking exams. Yes. So the mint family, rosemary as well, these plants have that kind of refreshing, lightening, aromatic quality that can just sort of wake you up and keep you focused. Um, I tell people sometimes to use strong peppermint brews and blend with almond milk or hemp milk to make a latte. There's no caffeine, there's no nothing of that nature, but just that really powerful aromatic quality of the plant is enough to sort of wake you up and energize you. So what peppermint or spearmint, you could use either of them here in this blend. One of the things it's going to do is it's going to counterbalance that sedative effect of the other two herbs. It's going to help bring lightness and kind of enlivening to your senses so that you can get that, instead of tired and wired, you can get, relaxed and yet present, which is the perfect state in which to be receptive for intuitive information. The other thing that peppermint does, or spearmint, ginger is also this way, elderflower works this way, is that it has a surface releasing or diaphoretic quality. So in large amounts, what that means is that it will induce sweating. And you can use it for colds and flu, or some of these other purposes where the goal is really about inducing sweating. But when we're using it in formula, what it's also doing, or what it's sort of more about, is about kind of flushing and opening the meridian energetic pathways in the body, kind of opening and unkinking those things. Which of course, if we want to be open to, all of the chakras and all of the parts of the body mind that could give us intuitive information, we want to feel like we're clear and open in that way. Okay, beautiful. So and then in terms of branching out and making your own blends, you can certainly buy, like lavender and chamomile blend, from the store, or take the different, relaxing herbs that are your favorites and try them in different combinations. A good way to think about formulation is to think about like two herbs that complement one another and work nicely together. So if we think about, like, in that first formula, that would be the sweetness of the rose and the linden that are both calming and nourishing. And then thinking about a third herb that either helps to enhance circulation or digestion to make the formula easier to absorb, or a third herb that offers a counterbalancing property to those first two. So that is kind of the general principle of this sort of triad formulation, which I think is the place to start if you're new to formulating and making your own teas. It also tends to mean that because the flavors of herbs are really what tells us a lot about how they speak or communicate, choosing herbs in this way can lead us to blends that actually are the most pleasant and good tasting. And you'll be pretty proud of yourself, I think, if you start playing with this, and how good your teas will taste. They really, really can turn out very well. So I want to pause here and make sure that we don't have any questions. And then we're going to move into kind of this next part, which is going to talk a little bit more about the plant spirit aspect of things, and definitely still in the realm of the physical, but branching a little more into plant spirit. And we're going to be playing with essential oils instead of with the raw bulk herbs. So let's just pause here. Questions that we have before we move on? Yes, aerial parts of wood betony. Yeah, all of these. That's a really good question, Allison. So what she's talking about is, you know, for many of these medicinal plants, the roots, the seeds, the leaves and stems, all of these different, the flowers, different parts of herbs have different functions, right? Because the plant puts different compounds into different parts of its body, just like we have, our different tissues have different composition. So all of the plants that we've talked about so far today, it's all the above ground parts of the plant that we're using. And then with the linden and the rose, it's the flowers and the petals. Yeah, that's a great question. And before we continue into this next section, which is going to feel pretty different, I want to also make sure that we're activating your learning by getting like one piece, one reflection, one thing that you're going to try or that you're going to apply in your actual real world life based on this. Like, what are you feeling like you're excited to try and to experience in real life? Good. Thank you guys so much for playing along and participating. It really helps the learning so much. Tanisha says, since it's nearly autumn, I'm eager to go out into nature and harvest and dry my own herbs for personalized blends. That is awesome. So in general, Tanisha, in after the first frost, that is the best time to harvest roots of things because once it gets cold, once we get frost, the plants put their energy down into the earth. So fall is ideally the best time for digging up roots. And if you can go out before the first frost, that would be a good time to harvest more of the aerial parts, so leaves and stalks and all that kind of stuff. Megan says, I haven't used Skullcap before and I'm excited to check it out. Yeah, it's a great, great plant. And Allison says, I'm going to make the launch formula and I'm excited about using foot baths for my partner who hates the taste of herbs. Yeah, I'm so excited about all of that, you guys. That's fantastic. Okay, great. Um, so let's transition and talk a little bit about this whole concept of plant spirit and connecting with the plants on this deeper level. So, of course, there is no substitute for spending time with the plant when it is alive and breathing with it. So if you have access to any amount of plant life or the ability to grow a basil plant on in your own garden or in a container, if you are able to walk by a friend's garden and sit in the presence of her rosemary bush, there's no substitute for being with the plant in real life. And because of the nature of this session, and because of the experience that I believe a lot of you have, I feel like it's sufficient for me to simply say that if you're interested in really developing this kind of plant spirit connection, you just have to go out into the real world and you just have to sit in front of a plant and you just have to breathe. And one thing that I think is really powerful to remember as you're doing this kind of plant meditation and connection is that the plants and humans have perhaps one of the most intimate relationships in all of creation because they exhale the oxygen that we need in order to survive. And they inhale the carbon dioxide that we release as almost as a toxin, really. We can die from overabundance of carbon dioxide if we can't get rid of it. They breathe that in, and that is what they live on. So there is a perfect reciprocal relationship through the breath, which is identified by many of the world's traditions as the physical embodiment of the spirit. And it is through this exchange of breath that both plants and mammals are able to have life, and birds and reptiles. Like all of these, life forms that are able to locomote and move around and do all these things couldn't do any of it if it weren't for plants, let alone food, and let alone fiber, and let alone medicine. It is as basic as the breath. So when you are beginning this experience of plant meditation, or even if you're not doing a full-on meditation, you're just harvesting, some cilantro to put in your tacos. Just pause for a moment and really feel the profundity of that exchange of breath. Think about the profundity of the exchange of breath with a favorite tree. And if you are so inclined, which I hope you are, let us all allow this intuitive knowing and this more mystical awareness to fuel our passion for protecting the sacred trees, plants, herbs, and flowers of this world without whom we could not live. Because let's not forget, even as we're excited and we're learning all of these great things, that we are living in a time of great danger for all beings on this planet. And that if we don't protect, there certainly are many human beings and animals that are worthy of protection and our time. But if we don't protect the plants, and if we don't protect the trees, and if we don't stop the clear cutting of ancient forests, none of us are going to be able to breathe. So that was my rant. I wasn't expecting to go on. But I think it's so important to connect personal healing to global healing and to global transformation. So let's just keep that in mind, keep that part of our sense. So as we think about the breath, think about the nature of breath, and the breath being the quality of spirit. I think that we can imagine that just as spirit and soul are a little bit different, soul is a little more earthy, is more embodied, is more particular and personal, while spirit is more transcendent, higher, beyond, rather than within. If the spirit of a plant is something that we can feel by breathing with it, the soul of a plant is what we can perceive with our nose through smelling it. And it's I believe the depth psychologist James Hillman, who has said that he believes that soul is most approximate to the experience of smelling something. And that it is insubstantial in a certain way, the smell. But it's also evocative, it's also sensual, it's also deeply embodied. And so the smell of a plant is actually the signature of her soul. And this is why when we start to work with essential oils, we have to approach this with such respect and such gentleness, because what we have is a concentrated extract of the signature of a soul of a being on this planet. And it takes many, 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 many plants to produce a small amount of essential oil. So this is a very powerful substance that the plant makes to do a lot of different things. Some essential oils are about defense, so that's where they get a lot of their antibacterial, antiviral properties. But the ones that we're really going to focus on today are actually about communication. If you think about the life of a plant is in the ground, is not able to get up and walk, not able to fight back, really. I mean, they can have thorns, but it's not the same as being able to, punch somebody. The way that plants communicate and defend themselves and create relationship is through the chemicals that they produce. And a lot of the chemicals that the plants produce that just attract us and give us pleasure and relieve anxiety and depression and clear our minds, it's not an accident that this has happened. The plants have made these things as a basis for communication, just the way that our hormones are a basis for communication within our bodies, okay? So when we're starting to work with these essential oils, we are opening up to the soul of the plant itself. We're making a deep connection to the personality of that plant. And we are also putting ourselves in touch with the parts of the plant that, in the cases of these oils, that specifically have to do with communication. Okay, so that's why these are the ones that are coming up in the intuition talk rather than the immune system talk or how to clean your house with natural products kind of talk. Okay, and so within the herbs or within the essential oils that I think are powerful for intuition, we have kind of a couple of categories. And I'm realizing that, as usual, I'm talking for even longer than I thought that I would. So please, if you're not able to stay, you can absolutely sign off, and I will be sending the recording to everybody, so no worries there. Does anybody have any essential oils that you already know and love that you think might be in this category, just intuitively or based on kind of your experience? Essential oils that you feel like in some way evoke a deep relaxation of the body or the mind, or that when you simply the act of smelling them kind of changes you. Something seems to shift. Some part of you seems to wake up and other things kind of go to sleep. Clary Sage, yes, absolutely. That's going to be one of the ones we talk about. Allison, tell us a little bit about what your experience with Clary Sage has been like. And this is not frivolous. Because herbs are beings and not things, we are in relationship with them. And there are probably people who you are really close with, that you know a lot about, that another person, maybe that person's mom is really close with them in a different way and knows other things about them. So the best way to learn about the use of herbs is in community, because each of us has a unique relationship with the plant, and each of us will see and experience that plant from a slightly different perspective. So we will always be able to learn a lot from listening to each other's experiences. I always learn whenever I hear you guys share about your experiences with the plants. You used it for your son's birth. Wow. Anyone else? Anybody else using essential oils? So before we get into this, I have strong opinions about the proliferation of essential oils that are happening now in the marketplace. Vetiver, yes, that's a very strong, grounding, deep oil. Yeah, often used for grounding and supporting the root chakra. I wonder if that is part of your experience at all, Beth, or if you have other experiences. So if you are just kind of getting interested or wanting to explore essential oils, I really encourage you to stay away from the two very major essential oil companies that you will see out there. I won't go into all of the deep reasons why. Instead, I'll give you two recommendations of companies that I personally use and have found to be really great. My favorite is this company called Appalachian Valley Natural Products. And for those of you who know Melita Mollahan, she's the person who turned me on to them. They're amazing. And the bottles, you'll see them, the bottles look like this. They have this kind of crazy emblem on there. It's like an eagle. So they look really weird. And I have never in my life experienced essential oils that are as beautiful and as high quality as these. These are definitely, like, your nose will tell the difference, and these are the best. And they are not, the price is totally reasonable and similar to what you would pay for other things. I also like Snow Lotus, which is I think snowlotus.org, not .com, I think. Peter Holmes's company. That says vetiver is very grounding and comforting. Great. Okay, so let's start there. Let's start with actually some of these essential oils that have more of a descending, grounding, comforting energy. So we're going to go back actually to Arwa's statement from a little while ago about being in that place where you're feeling like tired and wired in your mind, like this is going up here and you can't make it stop. And of course, when that's happening, or if like your mind is hyper focusing, like you've got like a little miner's lamp right on the front and it's not allowing in any information from elsewhere. Both of these are situations in which we want to be able to open up this pathway and then send the energy down into the ground, into the root chakra, into the physical body. And there are a lot of oils that can support us and help us with this. So this first one is my favorite. And I know you can't smell them, but I am going to experience each oil as we're doing this and share with you kind of what I'm noticing so that we can bring this sort of out of head a little bit. This first one is called Atlas Cedar, or cedar wood, Atlas cedar wood. And this, I immediately feel almost like someone has sort of combed my hair and then petted me all the way down the spine to my sacrum. A grounding that feels like being stroked and grounded at the same time. And there is also, so you know how like when you have a cedar closet or you've used cedar wood to line a box and then you put all your favorite sweaters in there for storage so that moths don't come in and eat it. Cedar wood also has a bit of a protective function. So there's sort of a grounding and protective quality. And when you're formulating or when you're blending and using oils together, it's nice to have an oil that kind of occupies that base note space. And cedarwood is a really nice one. Vetiver can do that same thing. And this a little bit goes into the realm of perfumery, which I am not by any means an expert in. But that sort of idea of base notes, middle notes, and top notes, you can think of that just as easily as oils and plants that work with the lower chakras, the middle chakras, and the higher chakras. Okay, it's like the same thing. Another oil that I experience as deeply grounding in this way is nutmeg. And nutmeg is a little bit more spicy. It's a little bit more kind of like hitting the back of my palate as I breathe in. And it's a little bit more energizing. So if you're looking for that grounding influence, this I think is a little bit more energizing and grounding. And then let me see if I can give you just one more base note here. Cypress isn't quite it. Let me think about majoram. Okay, let's try majoram. So this is a little bit more mid-range. It's not quite as deep as the vetiver or the cedarwood. But majoram, you probably know of this as a culinary herb, right? The amazing thing about this is this has a lot of very strong muscle relaxant properties, especially when applied topically. I've been making this awesome muscle rub in the last few weeks, and majoram is one of the ingredients in that. And I really think that muscular tension becomes a trigger for our minds to hold kind of energy and get stuck up in here. So anything that's going to help release muscular tension, I believe very strongly, also has a corresponding way of helping to open intuition. So these three are potential base notes that we can work with. And I would love to kind of start just formulating something and kind of see where we land. So if you're going to formulate with essential oils, I really like to use hazelnut oil as my primary carrier oil. It absorbs really well into the skin. Despite what you might hear, it is in general not a good idea to put essential oils directly onto your skin, just undiluted. Lavender, it's totally fine. Tea tree, if you have really oily skin, it's potentially fine. Everything else, dilute, dilute, dilute. It will work better, actually, if you dilute. Okay, I think I got cut off. Can you guys hear me? Can you let me know if we're back? If we're back online again? Just give me a yes in the chat if we're back. Okay, I see Beth typing. Yay. Okay, good. I'm sorry about that. I don't know what happened. It just told me that my connection went out. So, so this is a 4-ounce bottle. Whenever you're using essential oils, you must protect them from heat and from light. They're very, very fragile. So using these cobalt blue bottles, or when you purchase your essential oils, they need to be in dark bottles. If they're in clear glass bottles, they will be okay for a short time, but they won't last. And generally, it takes a while to get through an oil because you only use a small amount at a time. So this bottle is just a clean cobalt blue 4-ounce bottle with a blend of hazelnut oil and camellia seed oil, which is the tea plant, the seed of the tea plant. It's about 2/3 hazelnut and 1/3 camellia. And these are just gentle carrier oils that are very nourishing for the skin and that absorb readily. Fractionated coconut oil is a good one. Jojoba oil is a good one. Sweet almond oil. You can really choose your carriers as you like, or you can get more sophisticated about choosing your carriers. But for our purposes, this will work really well. And then the other super important thing I should have told you when we were making our dried herb formulas is that the most important thing to know about herbal formulation is you have to label your creations because you will think that you're going to remember what you put into that jar. And I promise you, you will not remember. You will not remember, and then you will have bunches of jars of stuff that you don't know what it is, and you don't know what it's for, and you'll end up throwing really awesome things away. So label, label, label. And so what I did is I just put a little bit of washi tape, which is that colorful masking tape, on this bottle, and then I can just write on it once I decide what's going to actually go in here. And I have a couple others you can play with as well. So I think that this first blend, I want to really kind of aim toward that tired and wired kind of condition, okay? So when you are using essential oils in dilution, for every ounce of oil or cream that you use, if you're going to massage this into the skin, for every ounce, you're going to use about 7 to 10 drops of essential oil. So that means, like, however many oils you're using, the total should be no more than 10 drops per ounce, okay? So this is a 4-ounce bottle, and it's about halfway full. So my total amount of drops of herbs for this bottle is going to be 20 or less. So I'm going to start with my base note, which is going to be this cedar wood. in order to address sort of the lower chakras and to ground and give me that sort of that stroking, a nice stroking feeling from the crown of my head down to my sacrum. So if you're going to add this, you're just going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so I got 5 drops of my base note. And we have 15 drops total to go. So I think with base notes, it's often good to just do a lower number of drops because they do tend to be stronger. And then I like to shake it after I do each addition. Hi, Kyoko. I'm glad that you're here. One benefit of me running over, sometimes people can join us later. So now let's talk a little bit about herbs that I'm going to say are sort of more in that middle range. And so what this is going to have to do with is, I want you to just place your hands on your tummy, on your belly right now. And so much of intuition has to do with what's happening in your literal gut. We have now learned that the nature of your vagus nerve, which is the wandering nerve that kind of goes everywhere from your actual guts to your throat to make it possible to change the tone of your voice, to the muscles of your face that give you expression, to your ears to allow you to hear either the low sounds of a predator or the mid-range sounds of human speech, and that also controls a lot of the state of your nervous system and your inner experience. This vagus nerve connects all of the happenings here in your gut to your brain. So it is not a mistake that our language has said that, trust your gut, or these concepts that relate intuition to the solar plexus. So when we're incorporating these oils that have this sort of middle note, what we're doing is we're calming what you might consider like the body branch of the nervous system, not necessarily targeting the brain, but targeting sort of the body branch of the nervous system, balancing that and calming that. Basically, if an essential oil smells good to you and you feel good when you're smelling it, it's probably doing this because the sense of smell itself is connected to the vagus nerve. And that is probably a huge part of where a lot of the benefit of aromatherapy comes from. So the first one I want to talk about is geranium. Geranium is, I feel, bright, and it's very sweet. There's a real sweetness to it. And as those of you who have been with me through a lot of conversation about Chinese medicine know, this concept of sweetness, this has to do with the organ of the spleen. And the spleen is responsible for helping us to transform our food into nourishment for the body and energy. It's also responsible for helping us to transform our life experiences into wisdom. And so this, I'm really feeling that as I breathe in this geranium oil, there is a relaxation that's coming into the middle of my chest. And I happen to also know that this can be used, applied to the bottom of the foot to help with sugar cravings. So that's kind of giving me another little spleen association. The spleen can trigger sugar cravings if we're out of balance there. So this geranium, this is not so much a muscle relaxant as it is a little bit more of a nervous system relaxant, and it's not like deeply sedating. It's sort of this nice balance of the two. So this is going to be my next one, and I'm going to put 7 drops, 7 of geranium into this blend. Some other options that we won't actually add here, but that I want to mention. Basil oil. fascinating. I did not know this until I was formulating my muscle blend. There are a couple of different strains of basil, which we know about, like holy basil versus culinary basil. So some of us are a little familiar with this. But there's a strain of basil that is called basil methyl chavicol. And this is a basil that is more pungent and that has an incredible ability to support relaxation of skeletal muscles. So if you are going to make a muscle rub, I highly, highly recommend that you put this methyl chavicol basil into your blend. And it's spicy. You know how like sometimes holy basil smells a little spicy? Mm, this has that quality to it. So it has those chemicals in it that are about that sort of waking up, enlivening and relaxing. Um, I just want to keep smelling it. Um, so that's another good sort of middle note. Um, Another really nice middle note that I want to make sure to mention is Roman chamomile. There are two different kinds of chamomile. There's German chamomile, which is more used for skin conditions. And then there's Roman chamomile, which is more used for sort of relaxation of the skeletal muscles, antispasmodic, whereas the German chamomile is more anti-inflammatory. Um, and this Roman chamomile, it really smells like apple cider. Like apple cider and like someone's kind of just like pleasantly kind of wiping the cobwebs away from my forehead. So this is another really good middle note. If you're going to do that muscle rub idea, um, Roman chamomile, the methyl chavicol basil, and then maybe a little lavender, maybe a little neroli. That would be a really good blend. Little majoram would be really, really awesome. Okay, other middle notes. I have all of my oils here, and it's like kind of hard to choose which ones to talk about in a moment. Okay, I know. Clary Sage. This is kind of middle, but moving toward higher. Um, so Clary Sage has a warming and almost euphoric quality to it. And any kind of sage is going to be associated with purification. So when we talk about the ritual aspect of using herbs to support intuition, and we talk about the applications of these oils, like this one that we're making together, um, a lot of times we use a bath or we use oil application before or after a bath as part of getting ready or preparing for a situation in which we're going to actively consult our intuitive knowing. Whether that is through using some kind of a divination tool, if that's part of your practice, or whether it's through a meditation or a journaling session, or even if it's just before an important conversation where you want to be in touch with all of these faculties. So that idea of cleansing and purification, for me, it doesn't resonate to think that like as a person, either me or you is like dirty and needs to be cleansed. But what does resonate for me is the idea that we can imagine letting go or washing away anything that has stuck to us or come into our minds or our energy field that doesn't belong here. And we don't have to make it bad in order to wash it away and release it and send it home to wherever it really does belong, you know? Um, so that is kind of the feeling that I get from Clary Sage is this does kind of does kind of warm me a little bit here in the center of my chest, but it also feels like it's kind of a fresh breath of air, and especially on that third smell that I just did, a little bit euphoric. And I very much encourage you to. It just occurred to me that Probably there are some things that you guys can observe just watching me smell these different oils and the way that I'm talking or responding or facial expressions or something. You might get a sense for the character of them just based on kind of like how I am being. Um, so that's Clary Sage. That's a really, really good one. And you can use any of these by themselves, especially in the beginning when you're first getting into these. Um, Use them by themselves and really get to know the character of each one. And then you can combine them and find the synergies. Oh, okay, one more middle. Sorry. Um, so this last one for this sort of middle zone is Lang Lang, just spelled Yalng, Yalng. Um, and this is often used for aphrodisiac or kind of sensual massage blends, and it's pretty easy to understand why. I can smell it from very far away, actually. Some of the other ones I've needed to bring closer. This one I am fully getting it right from here. And actually, I just heard my voice drop. I'm going into like Kathleen Turner mode. Um, Lang Lang is deeper than Clary Sage and then some of these other middle level oils. It's not quite to the level of those base ones, but it's kind of in there. And the scent I can best describe as kind of intoxicating. Um, it helps to ground the body and open the senses to um, pleasurable experience. And I don't know about you, but I think that so much of our culture is, denying of pleasure and denying of the body, that anything that can help us kind of get back into that receptive, open, deeply embodied way of being is really, really welcome. Um, Actually, I'm going to add a little bit of Lang Lang to our blend. So we have one base note and then two middle notes. So far we have the cedarwood, geranium, and now I'm going to add 2 drops of Lang Lang, actually 3 because we did 7 of geranium. So I have to keep my math straight. So we've got 5 drops of something that we can still add. I like to shake it each time. And I thought we were going to make 3 oils, but we're obviously just making one because it's like an hour and a half now. And I have a couple wrap-up things before Q&A. Okay, so talking about sort of top notes. The first one, I think this is best used by itself because of its delicate nature, is neroli. This is my favorite, one of my 2 favorite oils for people who are experiencing depression. It's very, very sweet, very gentle, and very calming. And much more lifted. I feel much higher and much more lifted than I did with the Lang Lang that we just were working with. Um, when you buy neroli, it's very expensive. And so it's best to just purchase it already diluted. So this one is already diluted 10% in jojoba oil. And a great way to use this, different parts of your body have a different amount of permeability to absorb things through the skin. The skin on your face and on your palms is pretty permeable. So what you can do is just put, remember this is already diluted. So I'm just putting a couple of drops of this onto my palm, onto the tips of my fingers. And then I'm just gonna first smell. So I'm just making a little cup with my hands where the oil is applied. And I usually do this with lemon balm to my partner. He loves lemon balm. It's amazing. I'll put a couple drops of this like this, and then I'll kind of like come up behind him and put this over his mouth if he's stressed, so that he breathes it in. And it works even when you sort of dive bomb other people with it. You can certainly diffuse, use these in a diffuser or something like that as well. And then I'm just going to apply this to some points kind of here on the inside corner of my eyes, my temples, And I'm actually on my throat, which is not usually typical, but for some reason I want to do that right now. And that's a lovely way to work with this oil. Again, I prefer to work with neroli by itself. Let's do just one more top note. So I want to talk about spikenard, which is not as, maybe not as famous as some of these others. Whoa, it's like, it's very, very high. It feels kind of like a gust of wind, like lifting me up as I breathe this. It's almost, if you imagine like eucalyptus, but less menthol, a little bit more, a little bit sweeter than eucalyptus. But spikenard is also a euphoric. And as we start to think about, sort of like with clary sage or even with, neroli and lang lang, some of these oils that can really help to just remove the cobwebs, if you're thinking about your third eye or opening up that kind of intuitive perception, opening up crown chakra. There's a way that a certain amount of this sort of like lifted, higher kind of energetic or vibrational effect is really helpful here. So I'm going to add some spikenard, 5 drops. We have 5 drops left that we can do. Now blend. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And what we have just made together is a formula, a synergistic blend of essential oils that we've chosen, that I've kind of chosen intuitively, using some sort of, I do know some chemical facts about some of these oils, but I really tried to stay tuned into the soul of the plant and to the experience that I'm having of the oil as I'm working with it. So what do we do with this little bottle once we have made it? Well, there are a couple of different options. So one is you can just use this as a massage oil any old time. You can massage it into your temples, you can massage it into your abdomen, into your upper back and shoulders, especially if you make one that's a little bit more targeted toward muscle relaxation. You guys, this blend smells really good. You can really smell the geranium, but I also get some of the other notes, but nothing is overpowering it. So you can use it any way that you like, but just a simple, massage on part of the body is perfectly, perfectly great. You can also do a pre-bath massage. So if you massage oil, especially a carrier oil with essential oils, into your skin before you take a bath, the oil and water don't mix, right? So the heat of the oil or the heat of the water from the bath actually helps the oil to penetrate even more. It can make your tub a little bit harder to clean out, and you do have to be careful not to slip in there. But that might be something to try if you've never done that before. And then you can also certainly use it as like an anointing oil after you get out of the bath. So if you imagine the bath as the time when you're releasing or you're cleansing, and then you use the oil as a way of inviting in and opening up to your intuition. Again, it's any amount of ritual practice is all about intention and the meaning that you assign to it. So you can work that any way that you like. Both of those options will work really well. And I have a recipe also for how to make sort of like a psychic or intuition opening bubble bath with essential oils. But I'm going to send that to you in the email follow-up for the session, because otherwise I fear that this is going to be a 2-hour long class, which I'm glad that you guys are hanging in here with me, but I don't want to keep you all afternoon, and I need to get out of this chair as well. So I want to just stop here and let's go to Q&A. And certainly in the Q&A, we can open up to other topics relating to intuition. This is really kind of just an introduction to the plant toolbox for supporting this in your life, but there is so much more we can discuss, and I'm happy to talk about all of it with you. And I can stay for 10, 15 more minutes if we have some good Q&A energy happening. So if you would like to ask a question voice to voice, you're going to click the Ask a Question button, which I'm pretty sure is in the lower right corner of your screen. My screen looks different than yours, so I'm not 100% sure. Or you can certainly type your question right in the chat box, and that will work really well too. Maybe someday we'll all be in person together so we can smell the oils all at the same time. It'll be a little more fun. Oh, yeah, no worries. We've just concluded the formal part of the class now, and we're open to Q&A. So anybody who has a question or a comment, you can, if you want to come onto the line and actually speak voice to voice, we can do that. You just have to press the Ask a Question button to raise your hand, which I think is on the lower right-hand side of your screen. Or you can just type it into the chat. And if we wait a couple minutes and there aren't any questions, then we'll all just say so long for now, and I will send the recording out to you along with that bubble bath recipe, which I don't know about you guys, but I just think there's something extra fun about a bubble bath. It's nice to just you can always just put a couple drops of essential oil in your bath. If you do that, make sure that you use something to kind of stir the bath water around, because otherwise the oils will be right on the surface. And as you step into the water, the oils will go right onto your skin. And depending on how sensitive your skin is, sometimes it can be too much, especially on sensitive areas of the body and the mucous membranes of the genitals. Not always great. So mix that around before you immerse yourself, and then that will be helpful. Okay, Tanisha has a question. And I think that this should be giving you the ability to speak pretty soon. So it's waiting for your response. Yay, hello.
Hi. I actually, oh wait, is it working?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I actually have two questions. My first question is, I've read somewhere that you can smoke certain herbs, like non-traditional herbs, like catnip, for example, for different intuitive and psychic benefits. And I was wondering, because the source I know wasn't necessarily super credible, I was wondering if you know anything about the credibility of that, and if so, what sorts of herbs especially can be used to enhance intuition without sort of suppressing your system like marijuana does.
Smoking blends are definitely a real thing. Oh, and Tanisha, click this off for a second. If you want to talk voice to voice again, you can raise your hand again. I just was getting an echo, so I clicked that off. Thank you so much for your question. The thing is, smoking blends really do work. That is a viable delivery mechanism to bring these, chemical compounds into the body for a lot of herbs, not just for marijuana and tobacco. However, the downside of smoking, there's a certain downside of smoking that is associated with smoking no matter what you smoke. And that is the actual combustion of the material, of the plant material, comes along with the carcinogenic effects. This is true of marijuana as well. It is nowhere near as intense as with tobacco, because most people just, on a population level, maybe not on an individual level. I don't know about people's individual consumption of marijuana, but on a population level, people don't tend to smoke the amount of marijuana over the number of years that people tend to smoke tobacco. And there may be other mitigating factors with certain herbs that cause a lessened carcinogenic effect. But because that is a risk associated with using herbs in smoking form, it's not something that I recommend or that I know a ton about. In fact, I would be pretty willing to bet that because you're really just talking about absorption, you're just talking about how do I get these compounds into the body, you're going to get the same effect from using catnip internally as a tea or from using it externally in a bath as you would from a smoking blend, but the smoking might just be slightly faster acting. And then certainly for people who are using marijuana currently but want to use something else to avoid that sort of dulling effect, there's the appeal of the delivery mechanism because it's familiar and there's a ritual associated with it, right? So this is my sort of long way of saying I would rather somebody explore substituting a different delivery mechanism along with a different plant in the case of marijuana. And honestly, in the case of marijuana, I think there is a lot of reason to use delivery mechanisms other than smoking for marijuana when it's being used medicinally. There's a pretty good there's a pretty good case to be made for that. So that's my take on smoking blends. Yes, it's absolutely valid, and it wouldn't be my first choice for you or for anybody. And if you have more questions, you certainly can type them in the chat or raise your hand again. It's so good to hear your sweet voice. Anyone else? Questions, thoughts, anything else that we want to cover before we close for today? And if not, then I would love to hear how you are going to incorporate or what you're going to incorporate from this class today into whatever you're currently doing to awaken or hone your intuition, whether that's a meditation practice, whether that's a practice of being honest with yourself and others about your needs and your wants, whether that is a formal system like Reiki or a psychic practice. I know that we have people who have sort of whole different approaches. I'd love to hear how you're going to bring this home and what you might be blending this with when you bring it into the world in your own real life. And then I think we're going to be ready to close because I'm not seeing more questions popping up. Continuing to work on growing intuitively and getting in touch with the divine feminine. Yeah, beautiful. When it comes to working with divine feminine, all of these embodied practices, drinking a tea, eating a food, rubbing an oil onto your body, smelling something, taking a bath, all of these things inherently belong to that world. So this is a beautiful addition to that practice. And it'll be really interesting to see for you, Tanisha, how the combination of some of these more embodied practices, you already have the yoga that you do, that's that embodied system. And I think of Reiki as very much a transcendent system that is about sort of the body, allowing something to pass through the body, becoming more of a channel and directing, but not, it's more of a directing feeling and connecting with something transcendent. It'll be really fascinating to see what happens as you bring some of this herbal stuff in combination with the Reiki. Laura says, I'm excited to try some of these teas and I'm beginning yoga practices again next week. Hoping to get back in touch with my intuition. You're so welcome. And I mean, what I would tell you is that um, when for any of us, when we're trying to get back in touch with our intuition, we just have to remember it's always here. It's already here, and you don't really have to do anything extra. The only thing to do is to remove or to let go of the obstacles or the things that are blocking you. And so I think starting to work with some of these plants is going to help you to do that. And um, there's nothing extra that you have to add. It's really just about taking away the things that are creating a block, and letting go of the mental patterns that might cause you to dismiss an intuitive knowing, rather than needing to actively, manipulate your way into being intuitive because you already are. It was a pretty powerful story that you shared about your roommate, um, that insight that came to you. So I have no doubt it's already there. You just have to clear the obstacles a little bit. Okay. All right, my darlings. Congratulations to those of you who stayed the whole time. This was quite a marathon, and I'm going to send you guys that bubble bath recipe and the recording. And please stay in touch. I'm planning to continue offering these by donation webinars on a fairly regular basis. So if there are any topics or questions or sort of general things that you want to know about in the world of herbal medicine and using herbs, I would love to hear about that. And we can see if maybe there are some additional classes that we can do that are inspired by your own requests. All right, my dears, have a beautiful, beautiful beginning of September, and I will see you all around.